So we're going to be exploring this fascinating goal-setting system that's been making waves. Companies like Google and Intel have used it to, well, kind of like skyrocket their success. We're talking OKRs,
OKR.
objectives
Yeah.
and key results. And, it's not just for these big companies. It can be applied to teams,
Yeah,
individuals, pretty much anyone looking to just get things done more effectively, right?
absolutely. And that's what's so powerful about it. It really transcends any particular industry or field.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be pulling some insights from John Doerr's Measure What Matters, really interesting book.
Great book.
But mainly we're going to dive into, what makes this methodology tick, how it works, why it works, that sort of thing.
Sounds good to me.
So let's start at the beginning. Where did OKRs come from? Like the origin story.
Well, you got to go back to the tech world, kind of the birthplace of so many innovations, right? Specifically Intel with this management guru, Andy Grove.
Andy Grove, yeah.
He was all about like discipline, results, really holding people accountable.
Mhm.
And OKRs were a huge part of his approach.
It's interesting how, certain individuals can have such a profound impact
Oh,
on the
absolutely.
way we think about work in management.
Yeah.
Speaking of influential figures, there's this story about John Doerr, venture capitalist, having this chance encounter with Andy Grove at Intel. I've heard that was a pivotal moment for OKRs.
It really was, yeah. Doerr was early in his career then, still at Intel, and that meeting with Grove, it kind of shaped his whole perspective on management, almost accidentally. It's like
Right.
a random event that sparked this whole revolution.
It's amazing how those chance encounters can really change the course of history.
Right.
So Doerr sees firsthand how OKRs work at Intel, and later he brings these ideas to this little-known company at the time
Little known, huh?
called Google.
Google, yeah, it was the late 90s, and Google had so much potential. But, they were still figuring things out, their management
Yeah,
structure,
a young company.
young company in a really fast-moving industry.
It's wild to think of Google as ever being little known. I mean, now it's like this giant. So how did they react to this whole system of OKRs, especially given their reputation for being a bit unconventional?
Well, you might think they'd resist something so structured, but Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders, he was actually very pragmatic.
Interesting.
He knew they needed some kind of organizing principle, something to kind of
Yeah.
provide a framework without stifling their creativity. And he saw that OKRs could do that.
So he was open to it. And did it work? I mean, did OKRs work for Google?
I mean, look at them now. It was
Yeah.
like a perfect match. Their data-driven culture aligned so well with how OKRs emphasize data and transparency. The results speak for themselves, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like we have this recipe for success, this combination of a data-driven culture and ambitious goal setting. And this brings us to a concept I've always found intriguing, stretch goals.
Yeah. Yes. Stretch
Can
goals.
you tell us a little more about those?
So stretch goals are all about pushing beyond what seems comfortable, what you think is possible. It's setting your sights high.
Like not just incremental improvements, but really aiming for those breakthroughs.
Exactly. Not playing it safe, calculated risks, sure, but really swinging for the fences.
I love that analogy. Do you have a good example of like a company successfully implementing a stretch goal?
Well, how about the story of Google Chrome?
Oh, yeah.
They set this really audacious goal, create a web browser that was faster, more secure, and more user-friendly than anything else out there.
Yeah, and at the time, it probably seemed like a crazy idea.
It did, but they went for it and they succeeded. Now look, Chrome is one of the most popular browsers worldwide.
It's incredible to think about what can happen when you set these ambitious goals and back them with, the right resources, the right people.
Absolutely, but you got to prioritize. You can't do everything at once.
Right.
Think of it like, that analogy about fitting big rocks, pebbles, and sand into a jar? Start with the sand and pebbles. No room for the big rocks, right? But big rocks first, the small stuff will find its way in.
That's a really good visual. And I think it highlights something important. So many companies get caught up in these like vanity metrics, likes, shares, clicks, but they're not always the things that truly drive success. Sounds like OKRs help you focus on what really matters.
Yeah, they force you to think about what you're really trying to achieve.
And what's an example of a company successfully shifting their focus from vanity metrics to something more meaningful?
Well, YouTube's a good example. They used to be all about views and clicks, but then they realized that watch time was a much better measure of user satisfaction. How long are people actually engaged? That's what really matters.
Yeah, it's not just about getting people to click. It's about keeping them engaged, right?
Yeah.
Actually delivering value.
Exactly. And that reminds me of that story about the how to tie a bow tie videos. You familiar with
Oh,
them?
yeah, those two different videos, right?
Mm. Yeah. One was short and to the point, optimized for search rankings. The other was longer, funnier, maybe not as efficient in actually teaching you how to tie a bow tie.
Right, right. So the shorter one got more clicks, probably,
Probably.
but the longer one kept people watching.
And that led to more satisfaction.
Exactly. So it really highlights why choosing the right metrics is so crucial.
It is. It forces you to ask, what are we really trying to achieve here? It's not just about a search algorithm. It's about your users, your audience.
And that's what's so powerful about this whole approach, right? It's about aligning your actions with your overall goals,
Absolutely.
whether it's in a business setting, a personal project.
It's about that alignment. And it's not just about setting the goals, but about fostering a culture that supports them.
Yeah, I was just going to say that brings us to, well, a bit of a shift from traditional performance reviews,
Mm-hmm.
this idea of continuous performance management,
Yeah.
or CFRs.
CFRs, yeah. It's about moving away from those dreaded yearly evaluations and towards something more dynamic, ongoing, more feedback, more development.
So it's less about like judging past performance and more about guiding future growth.
You got it. And companies are seeing the benefits. Adobe, for example, they ditched annual reviews, completely
Oh,
moved to continuous feedback. Huge increase in engagement, big drop in people leaving the company. Just created a more positive environment.
that's amazing. It sounds like it requires a real shift in mindset, though, not just for employees, but for managers, too.
Definitely. Managers become more like coaches, mentors. They're providing guidance, support, regular feedback,
Hmm.
not waiting for that annual review to point out areas for improvement.
Right. So can you give us an example of like what one of these coaching conversations might look like?
Sure. Let's say you've got a product manager who's struggling with a decision and it's holding up a launch. Instead of just criticizing them, a good manager might say something like, "Hey, I've noticed you're grappling with this. Have you thought about maybe laying out the best options but making your own preference clear? Would that help you move forward?"
Ah, that's great. So it's about offering guidance, not
Yeah.
just criticism.
Exactly. It's empowering people to make better decisions.
I love that. It's so much more
That's it.
collaborative.
It is. And that's something OKRs naturally encourage, this culture of accountability and transparency.
Yeah, I was going to say, when everyone's goals are visible, progress is tracked openly.
It creates a sense of shared responsibility, like you're all in it together.
Right. So what are some of the benefits of that transparency? Is it always a good thing, or are there any potential drawbacks?
So many benefits. First, it's incredibly motivating. Seeing your work contribute to the bigger picture, it's so much more inspiring than working in isolation. And then when you see what your colleagues are working on,
Hmm.
it opens up opportunities, collaboration, knowledge sharing, all that good stuff.
Makes total sense. And it seems like it would reduce a lot of wasted time too, right? Trying to figure out what everyone's doing.
Exactly. Streamlines communication. But you're right, there can be drawbacks if it's not done carefully. Transparency requires trust, psychological safety.
Right. If people are afraid to share their goals for fear of judgment, it can backfire.
It can. So it's not just about the system, but the environment you create around it.
Yeah. Speaking of environment and culture, you mentioned earlier how Adobe saw those great results when they shifted to continuous performance management. How do you create that kind of culture where people feel safe to share, to learn, to grow?
Well, leadership buy-in is crucial. If the folks at the top aren't fully committed to this,
It's not going to work.
it's not going to trickle down. Lead by example, demonstrate the value of the system through their own actions.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
Always. But communication is also key. You got to explain the why behind it all. Help people understand how it benefits them personally, not just the company as a whole. Answer that "what's in it for me?" question.
Right from the start.
Right from the start. It's about making that connection. The individual's goals, the organization's goals, how they all fit
A
together.
puzzle.
Like a puzzle, yeah. And it's an ongoing conversation. Regular check-ins, progress updates, open forums for discussion. Keep people engaged, keep them motivated.
Create a culture of transparency, collaboration, everyone feeling like they're part of the journey.
Exactly. You want people to be invested, excited about achieving those goals, not just going through the motions.
Right, because they have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a company's culture, it can really make or break the success of OKRs.
Okay, so are there any examples of companies that maybe struggled initially, but then figured it out, like how to make OKRs work for them?
There are. Take Lumeris, for example. They're a healthcare tech company. Initially, they had a hard time implementing OKRs.
Really? Why?
Well, It wasn't so much resistance to change, it was more about alignment. People were going through the motions but not really embracing the system. Leadership wasn't fully on board, and employees didn't see how it benefited them personally.
They weren't connecting with it.
Not really, so they actually paused their OKR implementation, realized they needed to build a stronger foundation of trust, get everyone on the same page.
That's interesting.
It was a good lesson. You need that cultural alignment for OKRs to really work.
It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. You got to create the right conditions for the system to thrive. Now, we've been talking about companies, but it seems like this could apply much more broadly, right?
Absolutely. And there's this really fascinating example how Bono and U2, the rock band, they've used OKRs.
Wait, rock bands use OKRs?
They do. Bono has talked about how they've used a similar approach to goal setting throughout their career, even before formally adopting OKRs.
That's so cool. What can we learn from a rock band's approach to goals? It seems so different from, like, the corporate world.
Well, for you two, it was about clearly defining the challenge, whether it was writing a hit song or launching a philanthropic campaign, then meticulously outlining the steps needed to succeed. They were incredibly disciplined and focused in their execution.
So it's about having that vision and then breaking it down into actionable steps.
Yes, and they didn't just want to be famous and successful. They wanted to use their platform to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, aligning their goals with a larger purpose.
Exactly. And that's something we can all learn from, right? No matter what field we're in, OKRs can help us channel our energy and achieve amazing things.
I love that. So I think we've covered a lot of ground already. We've gone from the origins of OKRs in the tech world to their adoption by Google, their impact on company culture, and even their use by rock stars. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
But let's bring it back to our listeners for a moment. Why should they care about OKRs? What's the takeaway for them?
Well, OKRs are a powerful tool for anyone who wants to achieve more, make a bigger impact. It's about clarity, focus, holding yourself accountable to the results that matter most to you.
And it's not just about business. It's about personal growth, creative pursuits, anything you're passionate about.
Exactly. Level up your game, take control of your destiny, and make things happen.
I love that. We'll continue our deep dive into OKRs after a quick break. We'll be exploring some of the potential pitfalls and how to avoid them, so stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. So we've talked about the good stuff, the power of OKRs, but like any system, there are also potential pitfalls, right?
Right. And it's always good to be aware of those, kind of like, anticipate the bumps in the road before you hit them.
Exactly, so you can navigate them more effectively. One of the biggest traps people fall into is setting too many objectives.
Too many.
Yeah, it's easy to get carried away like, oh, we can do this and this and this, but then it's just overwhelmed.
You spread yourself too thin.
Exactly. And ultimately, you end up underperforming because you're trying to do too much at once. Remember that jar analogy?
Oh, yeah, the big rocks, pebbles, and sand.
Right. Too many big rocks and nothing fits. You got to prioritize. Be ruthless about choosing those objectives that will have the biggest impact. Less is more in this case.
Less is more. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So what about the key results? Any common mistakes people make there?
A lot of people struggle with making them specific and measurable. It's got to be crystal clear what you're aiming for. Otherwise, how do you even know if you're making progress?
So, like, what would a vague key result look like?
Let's say your objective is to improve customer satisfaction.
Okay.
A vague key result would be something like, get better customer feedback. It's a nice sentiment, but what does that even mean? How do you measure that?
Yeah, it's too fuzzy.
Exactly. You need something concrete. So instead of get better customer feedback, you could say, increase our net promoter score by 10 points.
Okay, so that's specific.
It is measurable, too, and it gives you a clear indication of whether your efforts are paying off. Turns those aspirations into tangible targets you can track.
Love it. So, it reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, the difference between outputs and outcomes.
Ah, yes, that's crucial. An output is just a task, something you complete.
Like checking things off a to-do list?
Right, but an outcome is the result of that task. It's not enough to just do stuff. It has to be the right stuff, It's got to drive those results you want.
So can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say your output is launch a new marketing campaign. That's something you can check off your list, right?
Right.
But the outcome, the thing you're really after, might be something like increase website traffic by 20%. See the difference.
Yeah. One is the action, the other is the desired result.
Exactly. So it's about understanding the big picture And making sure your actions are actually contributing to the overall goals, not just keeping you busy.
It sounds like there's a real art to crafting these effective OKRs. It's not just about, like, writing down some goals. It's about thinking strategically, planning carefully.
Oh, absolutely. It's a process and it's
Yeah.
iterative, you know? You're going to make adjustments along the way as you learn, as things change.
Right. It's not set in stone.
Nope. It's about being flexible, adapting as needed. Think of it as more of a dance than a rigid march.
I love that. So we've talked a lot about the mechanics of OKRs, but what about the human element? How do you get people excited about this system?
That's where leadership comes in. Big time.
Okay, how so?
If the people at the top, if they're not fully on board, if they're not living and breathing OKRs,
It's not going to work.
it's going to fall flat. Lead by example, you know?
Hmm.
Show everyone how it's done, how it's beneficial. And of course, communication is key. Explain the why behind it all.
Make sure everyone understands the purpose.
Yes, help people see how it benefits them personally, not just the company. Answer that "what's in it for me" question and make it clear from day one.
Connect the dots between individual goals and the bigger picture.
Right. And keep that conversation going. Don't just talk about it once and then forget about it.
Regular check-ins.
Yes. Progress updates, open forums for discussion, all that good stuff. Keep people engaged, motivated.
So create that culture of transparency and collaboration where everyone feels like they're part of the journey.
Exactly. You want people to be excited about those goals, you know, not just going through the motions because they have to.
And speaking of culture, you mentioned Adobe earlier, how they saw such positive results when they shifted to continuous performance management. What are some key ingredients for creating that kind of environment where feedback is welcomed and people feel supported in their growth?
Well, you got to train managers to be effective coaches, mentors. It's not about being the boss. It's about guiding, supporting, encouraging people to reach their full potential.
Less command and control and more like guide and empower.
Exactly. What are some concrete steps companies can take to foster this kind of coaching culture?
Well, they could provide specific training programs that equip managers with the skills and tools they need to have these effective coaching conversations. Create opportunities for them to learn from each other, maybe through peer-to-peer mentoring or workshops. And most importantly, encourage a culture where feedback is seen as a gift,
A gift. I love that.
not something to be feared. It's about framing it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Absolutely. And there are some great frameworks out there for giving effective feedback, like the Situation Behavior Impact, SBI.
SBI, okay.
It encourages managers to be very specific, you know, like describe the situation, the behavior they observed, and the impact it had. No vague feedback. Everything's clear and actionable.
Makes it much more constructive, I imagine.
It does. And then there's the GO model: goal, reality, options, and will. It's a coaching framework that helps individuals set goals, explore their current situation, and come up with a plan of action. Very empowering.
It sounds like it. It gives people ownership over their development.
It does, and it aligns beautifully with continuous performance management. It's a partnership between managers and employees working together towards those shared goals. It's all connected, you know?
It is, and I think it all comes back to something you said earlier, that OKRs are most effective when they're aligned with a deeper purpose.
Yes. Absolutely. When people feel like their work is meaningful, like it's contributing to something bigger than themselves, that's when they're truly motivated.
It's like that intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. Remember Bono and U2, their music wasn't just about entertainment, it was about making a difference.
Right. It was driven by a desire to have a positive impact on the world.
That's what gave it so much power. And that's something we can all tap into. Find that thing that lights you up, that gives your work meaning. Connect your individual goals to a larger vision, whether it's making the world a better place or creating something beautiful or just making someone's day a little brighter.
I love that. It's about finding that alignment between your head and your heart, where your passions and skills intersect.
Beautifully said. And when you find that sweet spot, amazing things can happen. It makes me think of that saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Of course, there will be challenges, but when you're driven by passion and purpose, it feels less like work and more like a calling.
I agree. And that's what we want for everyone, right? To find that sense of purpose and fulfillment in their work.
Absolutely. It's not just about achieving goals. It's about living a life that's aligned with your values, your aspirations.
I love it. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive into OKRs. We talked about the mechanics, the importance of leadership and culture, the role of continuous performance management, and even how to avoid those potential pitfalls.
We did. It's been quite a journey.
It has. but I think there's still more to explore.
Oh, there's always more to explore.
I'm especially curious to hear your thoughts on how OKRs intersect with another important aspect of company culture: diversity, equity, and inclusion. How can OKRs be used to promote a more inclusive and equitable workplace?
That's a great question, and it's something that more and more companies are prioritizing, which is fantastic to see. OKRs can be a really powerful tool for driving progress in this area. For example, companies can set specific objectives around increasing representation of underrepresented groups in leadership positions.
Or creating a more inclusive hiring process?
Yes, it's about embedding those values into the very DNA of the organization, using OKRs to hold themselves accountable for making tangible progress. It's not just about words, it's about actions.
Walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their unique talents and perspectives. And the great thing is, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
How so?
Well, studies have shown that companies with diverse and inclusive cultures are more innovative, more creative, and ultimately more profitable. So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
I'm so glad we touched on this topic. It's crucial for companies to be intentional about creating inclusive workplaces.
Mm.
Now, we've been talking about the positives of OKRs, but are there any potential drawbacks or challenges that companies should be aware of?
Of course, not every system is perfect, and OKRs are no exception. One common challenge is getting everyone on board. It's a new way of thinking, a new way of working, and it takes time for people to adjust.
So patience is key.
Absolutely, you can't expect everyone to embrace it overnight. It's also important to make sure OKRs are not used as a tool for micromanagement. They should be empowering, not stifling.
So it's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
right? Providing structure and guidance, but also giving people the freedom to experiment and innovate.
Exactly. Another potential pitfall is becoming too fixated on hitting those numbers. Remember, OKRs are a guide, not a straitjacket. It's okay to adapt, to make adjustments as needed.
So don't get too rigid with the system.
Right. It's about using OKRs as a tool for continuous improvement, not a weapon for punishment. It's about fostering a culture of growth and learning where people feel supported and encouraged to take risks and learn from their mistakes.
That's a great point. It's about creating a psychologically safe environment where people feel comfortable trying new things, even if they don't always succeed.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey, the ups and downs, and celebrating the wins along the way.
I love that. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I just say, if you're looking for a way to bring more clarity, focus, and accountability to your work, whether it's in a company setting or a personal project, OKRs are definitely worth exploring. They're a powerful tool for achieving great things, but remember, the real magic happens when you combine those mechanics with the right mindset, a mindset of ambition, growth, and continuous improvement.
It's about embracing challenges, learning from setbacks, and never giving up on your dreams.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The power to achieve great things lies within each of us. It's about taking ownership of your life and creating the future you want to see.
That's so inspiring. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I know our listeners are going to walk away from this deep dive feeling energized and ready to take on the world.
It's been a pleasure. Remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. Embrace the process and enjoy the ride.
I love that. We'll be back after a quick break to explore some more advanced applications of OKRs and discuss how to apply this system to personal goals and aspirations. Stay tuned. So we spent a lot of time talking about OKRs in the context of companies and organizations, but I'm really curious about how this system can be applied to, like, our personal lives, everyday goals and stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. It really highlights how versatile this framework is. At its core, it's about setting ambitious goals and figuring out how to achieve them, and that's something we all do, right? No matter what our job is or what we're passionate about.
Right. So where do we even start? Like, do the same principles apply when we're setting personal goals as opposed to, like, business objectives?
They absolutely do. You start the same way by defining your objectives. What do you really want to achieve? What are those big dreams that get you excited?
Okay, so those big, ambitious goals, the ones that might even seem a little scary.
Exactly. Those are the ones that push you outside your comfort zone and help you grow. Let's say someone's always wanted to write a novel, but they haven't actually, sat down and written anything. They could set an objective to complete a first draft of my novel within a year. That's a clear objective that gives them a path to follow.
Okay, I like that. So once you have that objective, what's next?
Then it's time to break it down into those measurable key results. Using that novel example, maybe it's write 500 words per day,
Hmm.
or attend a writing workshop, or finish one chapter per month. These are the concrete steps that help you reach that bigger goal, and they give you a way to see how you're progressing.
It's like those milestones along the way, right? To keep
Yeah.
you motivated and on track.
Exactly. But we all know that life happens, things get in the way, and sometimes we lose momentum. So, how do you stay focused and keep moving forward when it gets tough?
Yeah, that's the real challenge, isn't it?
It is. That's where accountability comes in, and OKRs are great for that. When you have those key results, those specific targets you're aiming for, it's harder to make excuses or procrastinate. And it can be really helpful to have an accountability partner, someone who's there to support you and cheer you on.
Oh, yeah, I love that idea.
Hmm.
Having someone who believes in you and your goals, even when you're doubting yourself.
Right. It could be a friend, a family member, a mentor, or even a coach, someone who helps you stay focused and celebrates those small wins along the way.
That's like having that built-in support system.
Exactly. Because we all need that, right? We're social creatures and we thrive in environments where we feel connected and supported. And when you're trying to achieve big goals, having that support can make all the difference.
It's really interesting how this system, which we've mostly been talking about in a work context, can be so beneficial for personal goals as well.
It is. It shows that having a framework for setting goals and tracking progress can be helpful in any area of life. And it doesn't have to be rigid or perfect. It's just about creating a structure that keeps you moving forward.
So it's less about being super strict with yourself and more about having that roadmap to guide you.
Exactly. It's about taking control of your life, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's writing that novel, running a marathon, starting a business, or something completely different.
Yeah, it's about finding what sets your soul on fire and going after it.
Yes. And it's about enjoying the journey, all the ups and downs that come with it. It's about learning and growing and becoming the best version of yourself.
I love that perspective. It's not just about the destination, it's about who you become along the way.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into OKRs, any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've learned so much about OKRs, from the mechanics to the importance of culture and leadership to the power of continuous performance management. And it's been really inspiring to see how this system can be applied to personal growth as well.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that OKRs are a powerful tool for creating clarity, focus, and accountability. They help us define what matters most, make a plan to achieve it, and track our progress. But beyond the mechanics, it's really about cultivating a mindset of ambition, growth, and continuous improvement.
It's about embracing challenges, learning from our mistakes, and never giving up on those big dreams.
Right, exactly. It's about taking ownership of our lives and creating the future we want to see. And that's something we all have the power to do.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive and for sharing your expertise and insights on OKRs. This has been an incredible journey, and I know our listeners are walking away feeling empowered and inspired.
It's been a pleasure being here. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. So embrace the process, enjoy the ride, and keep striving for those amazing goals.
What a perfect way to end our deep dive. Thank you for tuning in to the deep dive, and we'll see you next time.